You're watching afl.com.au and the AFL Live app. What an incredible 2 nights we have had at the 2021 NAB AFL Draft. It's all been happening and we're here to recap everything as it happened right now. Cal Toomey is pumped, he's jumped up, he's over at the plasma again. Cal Toomey.
I love this play.
Let's take a look. This was the first round. This was last night.
Oh, this is his phantom draft. This is
very funny. Remind us, 12 from 12, the Dirty Dozen. You got it done. Round 1. Jason Horne-Francis, the #1 draft pick. Sam Darcy, Finn Callahan, Nick Dacos, Mac Andrew, Josh Shelley, and then Josh Ward. That was the pick we were all hanging on to.
We were here last night waiting to see what the Hawks would do at that pick. They were weighing up a couple of options, Ben Hobbs and also Matt Johnson at that pick. In the end, they went with Josh Ward, who was the right call, I think, in the end. Now, the Dockers, they were big winners. They had to be. They had to nail this draft on the back of Adam Cerra leaving, and I think they did. Jai Amos, Neil Erasmus, local lads, they come through. A couple of surprises in the back end of the first round who we've spoken about. Lekalia, who we just spoke about, his journey on the show. Amazing story as an intercept defender for the Giants. Angus Sheldrick here surprised a few as well, an inside midfielder who come on as a bit of a bolter in the second half of the season. So that left, though, some players hanging over to the second night because overnight there's been a stack of calls, there's been a stack of conversations about potential pick swaps. Basically, all the storyline was about Matt Johnson now.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we obviously felt for him last night when he was left hanging essentially, and a lot of talk about whether Fremantle would hold on to that pick, stick with the local flavour. They obviously took Amos and Erasmus, and then they decided, why not? We'll just take the WA trio, and they went with Matt Johnson.
I think it's ended up a really good result because they had a super position to be in. They could stay or they could take a bit of a deal and slide back and risk not having him there. In the end, they grabbed the 192-centimetre midfielder. He really complements what they've got, and he brings some more class to their group as well. He and Neil Erasmus, as a duo, are very good to bounce off each other. So looking forward to seeing them play for the Dockers and in purple for the next decade. Josh Goda, big North fan, gets to the Roos. That's a great story. This is where the Geelong Footy Club started its run of Geelong products. Toby Conway, back-to-back with Mitch Nevitt, the midfield option there. The Tigers had 3 picks in a row. They went with Tyler Sonsie, who we thought they had some interest in at 15, which they did, but otherwise they went with Tom Brown. They pick up Sonsie, Sam Banks, a halfback / wingman, and Judson Clark, a spicy small forward who can go through the midfield. Then some options here. We see a bid come through. Michito Owens, finally it arrived at number 33 from the Swans. The Saints very, very happy to match it at that point. So the next generation academy player becomes a Saint. A couple of good options here though. We saw Rhett Bazzo, the Eagles, go for a taller local option for them, a key defender / forward. And I don't think there'll be many clubs leaving tonight quite as happy as the Demons that Blake Howes got through, Riley, because they were considering him last night.
Talk to us about the Hawks, because a lot of people thought they'd trade up potentially for Matt Johnson.
Yeah.
They end up with 2 pretty good players, though, to complement what they did last night, bringing in Josh Ward. They get another really good midfielder in Connor McDonald, who's a balanced player, but they also bring in Sam Butler, who is one of the best small forward prospects of this year's draft.
He is, and I like the small forward aspect that he's not just a small forward goal kicker, which obviously is great, but it's the pressure stuff that he does as well. Sometimes can be not that fashionable, particularly at bottom age level or junior level. It's sometimes all about me. He is a player who helps out his teammates with his forward pressure and inside forward 50 tackling. So Sam Butler, the younger brother of Dan Butler, not as electrifyingly quick as Dan, who's at the Saints now, but I think at the same stage of their development, Sam's probably a more rounded player, so he might play some midfield time. Some other good stories, Paul Curtis, who we know has overcome his COVID-19 battle more recently and gets to the Roos to add a little bit of excitement to their forward line too.
And that was when the trades started happening. We've been waiting all night for those to happen. So we had a couple of trades at the end of the second round, and then we moved into the third round, and it all kicked off with, we love a sibling story, don't we? And Corey Warner obviously picked up by the Sydney Swans, which is just a lovely story.
It is. He joins his brother Chad there. They'd shown the most interest in him. Very similar traits in a lot of ways. A little bit of power through the midfield, an explosive streak, able to get away, has some good running capacity too. So Corey Warner joins brother Chad at that spot there in Sydney. Josh Fahey, the bid finally come from the Bulldogs. We love this little piece of fun from the Bulldogs.
Revenge.
I don't think they were wrapped that they had to match the bid at pick 2 for Sam Darcy. They got to pick back 40 onwards to match that bid for Josh Fahey. He becomes a Giant officially. Afl Draft, this was an interesting one, guys, because the Pies were a couple of spots back. They traded picks with the Cats to jump up and get ahead, clearly of the Bombers, to grab Afl Draft, who slid down the order a little bit further than I thought he probably would, but I think there's talent there to work with, and I'm excited to see how he goes at the Magpies.
Is he the steal of this year's draft?
He could be. He could be. There's a couple in this group, though. I think Zach Taylor is another potential steal. Marcus Windhager gets his body right, could be a bit of a steal too. Of course, a member of the Next Generation Academy there. Cooper Murley, injuries have stopped him from probably being as productive this season as he would have set out to be, but there's no doubt that he as a prospect has talent. And Garrett McDonough, he was the shock of the night. The player out of the VFL program at Richmond joins the Bombers to add some more speed and run to their mix. So one to keep an eye on, Garrett McDonough. He's a storyline, no doubt.
And then we move on to the fourth round, and Jai Sarong. This was an interesting selection because we feel like Fremantle had some interest in the younger brother of Caleb Sarong, who's obviously on their list at the moment. But the Hawks had the pick before and they pounced.
Yeah, they certainly did, didn't they? And we're starting to enter father-son city as well. But Jai Sarong, a key forward option, very different player to Caleb, 193 centimetres as a key forward there out of the Gippsland Power program. Hugh Jackson, the Power had their eyes on him, and Dante Vicentini, they ended up using that pick to grab a tall option there to bolster their ruck department. Jack Williams becomes an Eagle, a good pickup for them, probably available a little bit later than was maybe on the cards mid-season, but gets through, kicked 40 goals this year, a productive key forward who could be a bit of a steal at that point. Then we love the romance of these picks. Jackson Archer becomes a Roo. Jace Berglund becomes a Power player. And some really good stories here. Luke Cleary, overlooked last year. Yeah. Unlucky. Brilliant. Didn't have a year to perform for the Sandringham Dragons. Gets his chance this year, gets picked up by the Dogs. Greg Clark gets overlooked for 6 years. So that's an amazing story of resilience, and it's a good story again for the boys who are out there watching tonight, wondering where their chance could come. Well, you just got to keep going if you want it. And then the last pick, or one of the last picks, was a second chance.
And another good story in Charlie Constable.
Absolutely. Unique story, delisted by Geelong after several years at that club, had been up for grabs from a trade perspective, and eventually finds a new home at the Suns after moving in for that spot that was opened up from Hugh Greenwood. And then the final two spots. Cooper White, a flashy midfield option from the Geelong Falcons, joins the Cats. And the final pick of the night was Taj Wowoda, number 65, the father-son at the Melbourne Footy Club. The father-son duo, of course, Shane, his father, the 2000 Brownlow medalist, and Taj, a young midfielder on the rise too. So all 65 picks there. A couple more than most clubs would have expected in the end, and I think that's a good result for the pool overall.
Now, there are never any losers on draft night. We're all winners. Every club is a winner, but I want from each of you the club that you think did the best.
I think Fremantle did the best. I think the way they navigated their way through that opening 20 spots and ended up taking Jai Amos to fulfil a key forward need. They get Neil Erasmus to build on a midfield group that's already pretty exciting, and he'll be able to play some senior footy straight away next year and will be determined to do that. And then there's also Matt Johnson, who they had the offers for, but I think in the end wouldn't have been that far off their pick 8 anyway, which became pick 10. So they were able to get him with that first pick on the second day. And then they pick up Eric Benning late as a Next Generation Academy player. So I think they were one of the winners. They had to be, because they had these early picks, and they're important to nail the top 10 picks. But we wait and see how they go, of course. But there's no doubt that I think they selected really well.
Riles, what about from your perspective?
Really like what Brisbane was able to do throughout this draft. I mean, they obviously had 2 first-round picks, so they were in a position where they could win the draft. But I think when you've got 2 later first-round picks, you're never really sure what's going to come about. They managed to get Darcy Wilmot with their first one. I love him. He's an attacking halfback who can defend really nicely as well. Then they bring in Kai Lohmann with the last pick of the first round of the draft. Spoke to a number of clubs today that said they thought Kai Lohmann was one of the steals of the first round. They said if they had picks in that sort of 15 to 20 range, even a bit higher, maybe in the 10 to 15 range, he would have been right in their mix. Ultimately, they didn't have those picks, so he gets through to Brisbane at 20. They managed to bring in a defender, a forward, and then James Tunstall later in the draft with their third and final pick, a big-bodied midfielder who can come straight into that side as well. So strengthened all 3 lines with their 3 picks, so I like what they were able to do to a side that's still in the premiership window. So whereas Fremantle might be challenging from a bit further back, trying to make it into the 8, the Lions are challenging from the top 4. They've got to get players into the side that can improve them straight away in 2021. And I think particularly in Darcy Wilmot and Kai Lohmann, they've got 2 players that can do that.
And it's not over because tomorrow we have, of course, the rookie draft and the preseason draft. Tell us a little bit about that, Riley. It's you and Cal right here on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app.
Yes, it is around 3 p.m. We'll be going through every pick from the pre-season draft, which will happen first. Then the NAB AFL rookie draft. Keep an eye on a couple of names that might have missed out on selection over the last couple of nights. Then some names that we're all familiar with, the types that have been told by clubs that have been delisted but re-rookied. They'll come onto lists. Might even be a couple of surprises. Some players that got delisted by a club that might find a new home elsewhere. It's why we love the rookie draft. Cal said a couple of times tonight, not sure there's going to be too many picks.
Yep.
Have to see how it plays out.
All right, that is it from